The Paldean Wonders set has just released, and you're probably wondering which cards are good from the new set. Well, I'm going to show you the 3 things I look at when evaluating whether a Pokemon card is good or whether it's just filler. I'm also going to show you how to use those 3 things to evaluate which of these new cards you should be using and which ones I would recommend to try bringing to this week's early tournaments. Pillar 1, the speed test. First and easiest is the speed test. In Pocket, tempo is everything. And if a card requires 3 or more energy to attack, and it doesn't have a built-in way to accelerate that energy, think an ability, a basic form attack, or a dedicated supporter, then it is almost certainly too slow. In a meta this fast, if you aren't attacking by turn 2 or 3, you've already lost. Pillar 2, the stat check. Secondly, we look at the gold standard for stats. Right now, the meta is defined by the 120-140 rule. To be a top-tier attacker, you need to be hitting for around 120 damage while having at least 140 hit points. If the card can't trade evenly with the strongest EX cards in the format, or if it gets one-shot by a 130 damage hit, it's probably too weak to build a deck around. Pillar 3. Consistency. Basics are naturally more consistent than Stage 1 or Stage 2 Pokemon, because they require fewer cards in the deck to function. But you also have to look at the attack cost. If a card requires multiple types of energy to function, it's almost certainly not consistent enough to keep up with the top deck. However, some evolutions fight back with consistency boosters. Look at the basic form. Does it have a useful non-damaging attack that helps you set up? Does it have 50 HP or less so you can search it out with Lycia? These small details can make a clunky Stage 2 line suddenly viable by ensuring you actually get your pieces into play. Finally, we look at special factors. Does the card have a game-breaking ability, attack, or a unique supporter? Cards like Greninja can break all the other rules because its ability is so oppressive. The effect is unique and powerful enough that we can ignore Greninja's lackluster stats and the fact that it's a Stage 2 with no consistency boosters. Support Pokemon. The Pokemon that sit on the bench and support your active Pokemon play by a different set of rules. They must be a basic Pokemon. If you have to evolve just for a bench effect, it's too slow. And their effect must be unique, or at least the best version of its kind of effect. Don't play a worse version of a card that already exists. The first card we're going to look at is a support Pokemon, Arboliva. And the first thing you'll notice is that it is a Stage 2 Pokemon, which is a huge problem. We need support Pokemon to be a basic. That's because Stage 2s are slower, less consistent, and require you to run more cards in your deck to fit in an Arboliva than a basic Pokemon. It does have the new strongest healing effect in the game for an ability, and 2 colorless energy attack costs, meaning it can be in any type of deck, and it does 70 damage, meaning you can knock out an Oricorio. However, it being a Stage 2 Pokemon is enough that I am convinced this is not going to be a powerful card commonly run in today's meta. The next card is another support Pokemon, although this support Pokemon wants to be in the front, and that is Orthworm. It's a basic Pokemon that for 1 energy does 10 damage and accelerates another metal energy to a benched Pokemon. This is going to be the new premier way to accelerate metal energy. Because Orthworm has such a high hit point stat for a basic Pokemon and is not an EX Pokemon, it is going to outclass both Dialga EX and Probopass at accelerating steel energies. This card is going to be relevant so long as there is a metal Pokemon that needs energy accelerated to it. Baxcalibur walks the line between being a support Pokemon and a primary attacker. It has stats that make it able to be a primary attacker, and an ability that makes it able to support other Pokemon. However, I don't believe it's great at either role. As a support Pokemon goes, it again has the problem of being a Stage 2. Its ability is very powerful, allowing you to take an extra water energy from your energy zone and attach it to the water Pokemon in the active spot. And on the primary attacking side of things, it has sufficient hit points. 140 is great, but its attack only does 90. We want to see more damage than that in today's game. So, it's a very flexible card. It allows you to do some support and some attacking, but it's not great at either. I think you're going to want to try to pair Baxcalibur with a powerful basic water Pokemon that requires a lot of energy to use. And we have just the example of that in the Chi and Pao EX card we'll look at next. I don't think Baxcalibur or the Chi and Pao EX are going to be that relevant, but we will see. Chi and Pao EX is an interesting card. It's a basic EX Pokemon with 130 hit points. If it had 140, it would be substantially stronger. And it has an attack for 1 water energy, does 20 damage. I don't know why this doesn't do 30. If it did 30, it would be able to knock out basic Pokemon, which would be very helpful because Chingling, obviously, a baby Pokemon, has 30 hit points and would prevent you from getting into your partner that you really want, Baxcalibur. It blocks you from playing Rare Candy. So if Chi and Pao's Icicle did 30 damage, this would be a much more powerful combination. Finally, its Diving Icicle's attack requires 3 water energy, and you have to discard all of them in order to use the attack. But it does 130 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon. This is the most powerful bench sniping attack we've seen in the game to date. What you want to do with Chi and Pao is use it as a finisher. You want to build it up in the back and then bring it to the front to get the final knockout that you need to win. And so I think the pairing with Baxcalibur makes natural sense. You want to have Baxcalibur out there as a okay primary attacker, hope it can get you a point or two, and then you want to bring in Chi and Pao, have Baxcalibur power it up to get that third energy on it, and you want to just knock out the final Pokemon that you need to win. I can see what they're going for with this combination. I just don't think it's going to be powerful enough to compete in today's meta. The next Pokemon we're going to look at is Armarouge EX, and this gives us a great opportunity to use our 3 pillars we talked about to evaluate a card. First up is speed. Unfortunately for Armarouge, it requires 3 energy, which means it's probably going to be too slow. Additionally, you have to discard a fire energy to use this attack, so you're going to have to continually be powering up Armarouge. It is an incredibly energy-hungry card. Next up is stats, and its stats are great. It has 140, which means it can live those 130 damage attacks with ease, especially considering it has the armor ability, which makes it take 30 less damage from attacks. So, in practice, you are going to need 2 attacks to knock out Armarouge EX, meaning it's going to reduce the attack by 30 damage 2 times. So in a sense, it has more like 200 hit points if you take away the ability. Very tanky. And it swings for 120, which is absolutely acceptable in today's game. So it has the stats, it does not have the speed, and what about consistency? It's kind of somewhere in the middle. It's a stage 1 Pokemon, meaning it's more consistent than a stage 2, but less consistent than basics. And there's nothing about the basic form that increases its inconsistency. It has 60 hit points, so you can't use Lycia, and its attack doesn't do anything to help Armarouge out. This card, unfortunately, is probably just going to be too slow and too energy hungry to compete with the top cards in the meta. Next up, Pawmot. I have to tell you, I really like this. Starting with speed, it requires 2 electric energies, which is great. That means it's fast enough for today's game. Next up are its stats. It has 140 hit points, which again is excellent. That allows you to live 130 damage attacks, which are very common today. And its Thunder Blast attack does 100 damage. Now, this is not very powerful. We want it to do more like 120 to 140. However, there are a couple positives here. The first is that this is not an EX Pokemon. That means that it only gives an opponent 1 point for knocking it out. And the second is that it has its own supporter, Nemona, which will give it an 80 damage boost if you are attacking EX Pokemon. That means against EX Pokemon, you are attacking for 180 damage, which is incredible. One downside to this attack is that you do have to discard an electric energy every time you want to use it, which means it's going to be very difficult to power up your second Pawmot. You probably want to be running an electrical cord for your Pawmot so that when it gets knocked out, that one remaining energy goes to your second Pawmot. In addition, there is also the new Electric Generator item card, which gives you a 50% chance of generating one more electric energy. You'll definitely want to use that along with the new Nemona card to make your Pawmot deck better. Finally, consistency. That is unfortunately Pawmot's downside. It is a Stage 2 Pokemon, and none of its Stage 1 or basic forms do anything to help its consistency. You do probably want to run one of the Stage 1s because it has an attack that's powerful enough to knock out baby Pokemon and can help you get around those frustrating Chinglings. Pawmot overall, I think, has a chance to be good in today's meta, especially with all the extra support it gets, but unfortunately it's probably outclassed by another electric Pokemon. And that other electric type is of course Bellibolt EX. Who saw this coming? It is the strongest new card in the set, and I would be shocked if anything proves me wrong. It does all three of the things we're talking about here very well. First up, its speed. It only requires 2 energy on Bellibolt to do its attack. Although it does need 4 energy in play, not necessarily on Bellibolt, to get its full damage. That is good enough speed, especially from the electric type, which can generate its own energy quite well. Next, its stats. 160 hit points means it can easily live attacks from anything in the meta currently, and get off 2 attacks very consistently. And its damage, 140 once you have 4 energy in play. Also, it's very important to note here, you definitely want to play the training area stadium card with Bellibolt. That will allow you to do the extra 10 damage because this is a Stage 1 Pokemon, bringing your maximum hit up to 150, which is enough to knock out a Hydreigon in a single hit. And Hydreigon cannot run Giant Cape because they're too busy running Poison Barb. So that's going to give you a great matchup into Hydreigon, because you can live a hit from them, and you can knock them out in a single hit. Finally, consistency. You want to run the old version of Tadbulb that we had from a previous set, not the new version we got in this set. And that's for 2 reasons. One, that Tadbulb has 50 hit points. That means it can be searched out with Lycia. And 2, it also has an attack that accelerates an energy onto itself, which is going to help you get to the 4 energy you need to do maximum damage even faster. Now we have everybody's favorite new card, Meowscarada EX. And this one's a bit tricky. I think it is a powerful card, but it's going to take a very good player to use it to its full effect. And that is because of the Flower Trick attack. For only 1 leaf energy, you get to choose a spot from your opponent's active spot and bench. And at the end of your opponent's next turn, it does 70 damage to the Pokemon in that spot. This has an incredibly high skill cap, and I am so fascinated to see what the high-level players are doing with this attack. But right away, 70 damage is enough to nuke almost any standard basic Pokemon, and because it requires only 1 grass energy, there's a lot of high roll potential here. If you go first and Rare Candy on turn 2 into Meowscarada, Flower Trick is almost certainly going to just net you a kill. The other thing is, if you use Flower Trick on the active spot, and then next turn use Solar Beam, you are guaranteeing at the end of their turn, they take 70, and then on your turn, they take 80. So that's 150 total damage before they have a chance to do anything like heal themselves. So that could be a really strong way to guarantee knockouts on big cards. Like I said, this is going to take some high skill to use, and Meowscarada's hit points for a Stage 2 EX is rather low at only 160, and its biggest attack only does 80 damage. Fortunately, it being Grass type has a lot of advantages to it. 1, it's super effective damage to Hydreigon. 2, you have access to Leaf Cape to buff up that 160 hit points. And 3, you also get healing from Erica. And the final benefit to grass types is quick draw or quick growth extract, which will help you evolve more consistently. The last thing to mention about Meowscarada is that some of the pre-existing cards are quite good. You have a basic Litten from back in the day that has a Cry for Help attack. That's the one you want to use because it's going to add more consistency to your deck. And you have a non-EX Meowscarada, which does extra damage to EX Pokemon, that you also want to include at least one copy of. This is a solid card, and I'm really excited to watch how Flower Trick really changes the way the game is played. The next card we're going to talk about is Goldango EX, which is a little bit hard to evaluate because of its unusual attack Spending Rush. One of your opponent's Pokemon is chosen at random for each metal energy attached to this Pokemon. For each time a Pokemon was chosen, do 40 damage to it. So this means the attack ramps heavily with the number of metal energy on it. Because of that, you're going to want to pair it with that new Orthworm we talked about earlier. Ideally, you want your opponent to have to go through 2 Orthworms, each powering up your Goldango EX, and then bring in your Goldango EX to get all 3 of the points you need to win. Naturally, this is going to require some RNG. I think you're going to want to have only a single copy of the Gimmighoul and 2 copies of Orthworm to increase your likelihood of leading off with that Orthworm. You also will want 2 copies of Goldango because you want to make sure you're able to find it and evolve into it by the time you're ready to use it as an attacker. I think the tricky part of this deck is there's just so much luck involved. You have to start with the right basic Pokemon, otherwise you're way behind. Every time you use the Spending Rush attack, there's a big RNG element because you don't know which Pokemon are going to get selected how many times. But there is also a lot of power in this deck, and it's especially good into Pokemon that require the benches to be full for their maximum damage, such as Suicune and such as Mega Altaria, because you're just going to be knocking out weak Pokemon on the bench pretty easily. You might lower the amount of damage those Pokemon can do back to you. You're also really going to have a heavy impact or heavy focus on the Pokemon tools in this deck. On the one hand, depending on your matchup, you might have to put a protective poncho on your Goldango EX in the back so that it doesn't get Cyrused into the front line with a Greninja ping, for example. But on the other hand, it sure would be nice to be able to use your Metal Core Barrier to ensure your Goldango is taking multiple hits. I think you probably want to run at least 1 Poncho and 2 copies of Metal Core Barrier, because worst case scenario, you can use your Metal Core Barrier to keep your Orthworms alive longer. But those are just going to be some of the decisions that you have to make when running a Goldango deck. I think this has a chance to be a meta contender, but I think it's going to involve too much RNG and not be consistent enough to be at the very top of the meta. So, if you're looking to bring a deck to this weekend's early tournaments, or just wanting to know which deck you should start building for when ranked comes here in a couple of weeks, these are my top 4 recommendations. First up has to be Bellybolt EX. I refuse to believe that there is a card better than this from the new set. I think you want to make sure you are using the old Tadpole with 50 HP so that you can run Lycia and so that it can power itself up. And I think you want to be pairing it with Zeraora to get more energy onto your bench more quickly, as well as that new electric generator item, which will help again get you to that 4 energy more quickly. You probably also want to run 1 copy of Oricorio just because it can just win you some games and you're already using electric energy anyways. Again, make sure to run Training Area with it, that Stadium card, so that you can knock out Hydreigons in a single hit. My second recommendation would be Meowscarada. I think this deck has a lot of potential, but there is a high skill ceiling to using Flower Trick correctly. I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm really interested to see what people do with Flower Trick. This is going to be one of the things I'm watching most in these first week's tournaments. Please keep in mind that this is a grass Pokemon, so you are hitting Hydreigon for super effective damage. Just consider Hydreigon when you're building a Meowscarada EX deck. I really do think Pawmot has a shot. It does 180 damage to EX Pokemon if you use the new supporter card, Nemona, that goes with it. That's going to give you such an interesting matchup into Mega Altaria, which has 190 hit points. I think finding the way to do that extra 10 damage is going to be really important when building a Pawmot deck. The easy answer might be a Rocky Helmet. So you do 180 to it, and it can't attack you back, right? And so it has to retreat, and then you just need Cyrus to win you the game. I think also pairing it with a Spirit Tomb might be a good way to do this. There's two different Spirit Tombs that could work here. One has the Final Scream ability, which, if it gets knocked out, does 10 damage to all of your opponent's Pokemon. That could work to get 10 damage onto the Altaria. Also, the Swirling Disaster Spirit Tomb for a colorless energy just does 10 damage to each of your opponent's Pokemon. I think either of those Spirit Tombs, I might lead towards the Swirling Disaster Spirit Tomb, but either of those could be really great ways to get the 10 damage onto the Mega Altaria and allow you to just knock it out in one hit and give you a very high winning matchup into Mega Altaria. I'm very curious to see how Pawmot players do in this first week's tournaments. And lastly is that Goldingo EX deck I was talking about. Again, you want to pair it with the new Orthworm, maybe only use one copy of Gimmighoul so that you're leading Orthworm more often, and run a lot of tools in here because metal types have a lot of good tools they could use. Also, consider running a Protective Poncho to make sure that you don't get your Goldingo Cyrused up prematurely. Thank you so much for watching. I know this was a long video, but I really hope it helped you get ready for this week's tournaments. And if you enjoyed, please leave a like and drop a subscription. I would really appreciate it. Bye-bye for now.